Joining us now, former governor of Virginia, might run for U.S. Senate in 2018. Jim Gilmore, Governor, good to have you with us, sir.
Good. Thank you very much, John. Pleasure to talk to your listeners.
Trump's speech yesterday, you did a whole column on it that I thought was pretty insightful. Share with our audience your thoughts on the Trump speech to the UN and his really rejection of a new world order.
Well, that's right. First of all, I watched the leftist press on television this morning, and I'm amazed at their lack of awareness of what the UN speech was really all about and the direction that President Trump is going. They seem to continue to think, well, we have to judge this by the standards of the old way of doing things, and by those standards, it wasn't a good speech. But by the new standards of the direction of where we're headed, it was a great speech. And I think that people need to read the speech. So, number one, the most important thing is he is redefining America's relationship with the rest of the world. He's really rejecting this idea that we have to subsume America into the rest of the world to our disadvantage. He recognizes that other countries are playing a double game. They're protecting their own interests while expecting the United States to surrender ours, and he's done with that. But he did not reject the idea of international cooperation or participation. He just simply redefined this as no longer being something where America would be put second. So that was the most important thing. Then the second thing, which struck me, was his definite and lengthy rejection of the concept of socialism. And, he recognized, and so do I, that socialism is an evil, that it is the theft from one citizen to another. It ultimately destroys incentives and freedoms. And he rejected it. And he recognizes that socialism is being put forward by the Chinese. It's being put forward by other evil and wicked countries around the world, and it has to be defeated. And I then added a little sentence and pointed out that the American left is determined to pursue socialism in this country, and that has to be resisted also. Then you move on to the more specific issues of Korea and Iran and those other areas. And actually, I believe that the Korean thing is very serious. I think he's laid down a marker. I think he's made it clear that we're not going to allow ourselves to be intimidated. And my own personal view is that the Koreans are a stalking horse for the Chinese. They are testing the United States' will to go forward into the future by this behavior by the North Koreans. So if we have to strike the North Koreans, it is the Chinese who are responsible, not the United States.
All right. So, look, I agree with you on the China-North Korea issue, Governor Gilmore, and you're really one of the first foreign policy people with knowledge of it who can talk with authority as experience that you have to say this, that North Korea is simply a stalking horse for China. That's why China doesn't do anything. That's why they pulled the wool over the president's eyes at the beginning. They went to Mar-a-Lago, big meeting. China says one thing, they do the exact opposite. And they were like, yeah, don't put any of these sanctions on us. Let us continue to dump steel and aluminum. But here's what we're going to do. We'll help you with the North Koreans. Not only they're not helping, they're part of the problem. Because as we saw in the second quarter, 33%, their trade with Pyongyang went up 33%. So they're actually increasing their activity with them in order to get all this done. But nobody seems to be going there. And a lot of us are frustrated. Except you. Yeah, I want to say that on the air. You're the only person in America who has called this out in a position of leadership authority. I mean, I can do it. I'm a radio talk show host. It doesn't matter. But you're in a position of authority. You were head of the 911 Commission. You know what's going on. And you're right. And the president, remember during the campaign, all this tough talk on China, nothing has happened. No tariffs, nothing. And so there continues to be this, dialogue. We haven't done anything. And they're the whole issue with North Korea. If you were president or advising the president, what do you think we have to do?
Well, first of all, we have to understand where we are. The fact is that we are in World War III. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to be shooting or flying missiles or any of that kind of thing. We don't have to think about war like we think about World War II, where we were trying to defeat the Japanese or defeat the Nazis. War is a continuing conflict that is intended to create a political result. And what is going on is the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, are determined to upset the Western liberal or freedom-loving order. That's what they're determined to do. And they're trying to get the facilities, the nuclear weapons and the other things to upset that order. If you don't believe me, just look at what the Russians are doing in the Baltics and Poland and their actual conquest of Crimea, which no one recognizes. Look at the Chinese in the South China Sea. This is a big chessboard, and the North Koreans are merely a pawn in the chessboard. They're an effort to just see whether the United States has the will to resist. The UN speech was terribly important. He stood up in front of 193 nations at the United Nations, and I've listened to the left-wingers this morning. Well, he wasn't going to win any friends with this speech. Well, he wasn't going to make everybody love him with this speech. He wasn't trying to do that. He's not running for president of the United Nations. He's running, and he's actually acting as president of the United States. And his goal there was not to win friends. It was to inform people of what the American policy is. That's why the United Nations speech was so important. And second, I want to come back to this. We are in a war. The people of the United States need to understand. If you don't believe it, look at 9/11. These nuts in New York that were on TV this morning, they of all people ought to understand the conflict that we're in. They have 2,000 friends that they were walking around with in New York that are dead now because of this conflict. And it's ongoing. Mm-hmm. It is an ongoing conflict. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to become a shooting war, but it will become a shooting mm-hmm. war. And yes, unless the United States and its allies stand up for themselves and for the structure of liberty that we put into place since World War II. If we don't stand up and defend it, they'll push and push until we do end up in a war that we really don't want to have.
No question about it, and I appreciate your comments on that. Governor Gilmore, you're spot on. That's why it would be interesting if you ran for U.S. Senate from Virginia, so you would be able to have these types of conversations with voters on the campaign trail, what your vision is and what you think we should be doing. Let's get to the gubernatorial race. I think Ed's going to win. Polls have it tied. Now maybe Northam, the lieutenant governor, is slightly ahead. I was at the debate last night. I thought Gillespie cleaned his clock. Your thoughts on the debate and that race?
Well, I didn't see the debate. I was elsewhere during the time of the debate. But I've read some reports on it that Gillespie did very well during the debate. The question, though, remains, what is American politics really about today? Listen, I think that Gillespie can win. I think there's a good chance that he will win. But a lot of that is because of this ongoing thing that produced President Trump, and that is a general distaste of the American people and the people in Virginia of the status quo. And this leftward-leaning, leading status quo that is represented by the left wing in this country, which has taken over the Democratic Party, is being rejected across the United States. So for that reason, they may be in for a surprise. The Trump phenomena, in fact, may be an ongoing stream, and it may continue into the Virginia race, and Gillespie may win, largely because Northam has self-defined himself. He went out there and just said, look, I'm the most left-wing person in the world. He's following the Hillary Clinton playbook that carried Virginia during the general election. But there's a rising frustration that may very well elect Ed Gillespie governor of Virginia.
Wow. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think Ed's going to win, and I agree with you also, Governor Gilmore. We've been saying this now for a couple of weeks that I don't know what Ralph Northam is doing. You know him. I know him. You know, you look at him giving these answers, and he never gives a straight answer to anything, which is not really how I've ever interacted with him in my life. So it's like he's running for governor, and all of a sudden everything has changed, and I can't figure it out. And the only thing that I can come up with is, you know, maybe they're just so petrified of their base, of the progressives or something. I don't know. I mean, is this real? I mean, you know Ralph Northam. Is this on the campaign trail for governor? Is this really the guy that you've interacted with for a long time?
No, I don't actually know him well. I met him once and found him to be a very pleasant fellow, but it was an unsubstantive, just brief conversation. You have to look at what really is going on out there, and I think that Ralph Northam is playing not to lose. I think he thinks that there's a majority of voters in the state of Virginia, centered mostly in Northern Virginia, that will vote Democratic almost by reflex. And his job right now is to not make any of them mad and to feel like that they'll vote for him. But he's missing something, in my view. and that is that there's a 30% drop-off in turnout between presidential elections and gubernatorial elections. 30%. So as a result of that, the electorate really looks different in gubernatorial elections than it does in presidential elections. But Northam is operating his campaign as though this was a presidential election, and we're going to see the same kind of turnout that they saw for Hillary Clinton. I don't believe that. I think it's going to be a different electorate. Now, does that mean that Gillespie's going to win? Not certainly. He's got to make the case that he's going to move in the right direction for the state of Virginia, the way Trump is making it in the national office. But he can win because the electorate is going to be different, and I think that there's a general revulsion against this leftward-leaning direction that the left wing through the Democratic Party wants to take the state and the nation.
All right, that's going to sum it up. I want to thank former governor of Virginia, Jim Gilmore, for being with us. So, Governor Gilmore, straight up, when are you going to make a decision on whether or not you're going to run for the U.S. Senate in Virginia?
Look, I have not. I'm considering it, but look, I want to be very direct with you, John. Well, you're always direct with me. I'll be direct with you. You can't. I just learned in a couple of races that you can't run for a large office like the Senate or the presidency without a lot of cash. And the fact is that the national Republicans are saying that the Virginia seat is not one that they want to fund. Well, if they change their mind and they put the cash up so that we can at least get our message out, I think we have a superior message, and I think that the Republicans and the conservatives ought to be in these Senate seats. But we got to be realistic about this, and I'm being realistic. So let's just see if the support's there. I'm considering it, but I'm nowhere near making a decision. I'm just going to be frank with you.
All right. Well, there's already 3 candidates in. Corey Stewart, E.W. Jackson is going to run, and we believe that House of Delegates member Nick Fredericks is going to run also for the chance.
I know, John, but we actually have to win the seat. You know what I mean? We actually have to win it, okay? There's no point in just running a race. You got to hold the seat for the people of the United States and the people of Virginia. So you got to win.
That's true. You have to win. And whoever is the nominee, they're going to be an underdog going against Tim Kaine. No question, an underdog. But we'll see what plays out. 2018, a long way off. Governor, thank you for being with us. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on the gubernatorial race and also Trump's speech yesterday in the United Nations. Governor Gilmore saying it is a rejection of a new world order. Thanks for being with us, Governor. Always a pleasure to have you on, sir.
Thanks for your leadership, John. You're a rising star.